Good morning, good morning. All right, here we go. More Lehi in the desert. Actually, before I start that, it's an interesting thought of mine that I've had. Because last night I dreamed I was back in the mission field. Like I was just arriving back to my mission that I went to, San Diego, to the mission home, and under Elder and Sister, oh geez, I had it in my mind all this morning, Olson. There we go. They were still mission presidents for me. And even though I'm now much older, I was called back to be a missionary in San Diego. And it's rare, but every once in a while I have those kind of dreams about being back on my mission in some way. But this time I was just starting out, but it was so familiar yet again. I always try and figure out, like, why is that? I wonder if I'm finally understanding that I'm being called to a work or something. My only hope is that I actually fulfill the work that I'm called to, that is needed. So, it's always interesting. I was packing very light, and then more stuff started appearing out of nowhere that I had from my own home that I apparently brought to the mission, but not on the bags that I brought in. Like there was just board games appearing, and I'm like, what? I wouldn't bring this on my mission. Anyway, one of those funny things, and so it makes me wonder. Like I think a lot of times we're given important or significant dreams than we realize. I'm not saying like behind every blade of grass there's meaning. Behind every dream there's not always meaning, but there are some times where it's just like, this one's maybe a little more special than others. And maybe a nod in the right direction, All right. And let's talk about this. A word about plates. Lehi, the winner. This is chapter 6. Da-da-da-da. Cool. And I think after this... Oh, wait, is there more after this? Lehi, the winner. No, this is the ending chapter of Lehi in the desert before we go to the world of Jaredites. And we are literally right about halfway, which is perfect. Okay. Last time we were specifically talking about the not only the poetry, that was the time before, but dealings with Laban, how he was a politician, how the mindset was, at least Hugh Nibley's mindset was all about war and spies and such. And I kept presenting my idea that, no, this is Passover because of how often they were talking about cavorting with the elders, and that he thought that it was perfectly fine that he was grabbing the plates and perfectly fine that he was bringing them to the elders in the church. Which, if you're war planning, why in the world would you be bringing records to elders of the church? So, these are the details that we don't have information on. Because of the pattern that God uses, I still think that it's Passover. Whether it was, we need to preserve the records and bring them to... If it's more warlike, like Hugh Nibley thinks, totally understand. I could be wrong either way, but I still hold to that Passover idea simply because God is really good at using patterns. All right, Lehi the winner, a word about plates. We have seen how the ruler of Byblos. We have seen how the ruler of Byblos, to score a point in bargaining with Wenamun, had his family records and accounts brought out and read to him. That was in our last reading. Basically, he was a big trader, and he said, look, I have these records that show that I'm this ruler. And then he was still, tried to be robbed by the local politician. That was last time. So, let's continue on with what Hugh Nibley is saying. In the Amarna tablets, the Rabu, one of the Palestinian city, writes to a neighboring prince, but now behold, note the Book of Mormon style, the king causeth that his true city should go from his hand. Let the king search in the tablets which are kept in the house of his father, and learn whether the one who rules Gubla has been his true servant. Here, as in Byblos, the records were kept at the house of the ruling family. Cough, cough. I'm saying cough, cough. Even in distant Rome in the time of Lehi, the records from which the later annals were composed seem to have been preserved on tablets in the houses of the leading families. Cough, cough. Again, I'm saying that Laban was the head, like Don Bradley was saying, likely the head of a Josephite family of the tribe of Ephraim. If I remember right. Yeah, Ephraim. At the time, the practice seemed to have been general around the Mediterranean, where the record was one of real importance. Plates of copper, bronze, or even more precious metal were used instead of the usual wooden, lead, or clay tablets. One of the most recent finds of this type from Palestine is a copper or bronze plate in Hebrew dating from the 12th century BC, containing a message of entirely secular, profane character. Huh. Is it the same profane as we use now? Is it just secular dealings, or was this a romance novel? Anyways, we'll leave it at that. But which must have seemed important enough to be engraved on durable, though impractical, material of metal. More precious documents, such as the famous Treaty of 1287 between kings of Egypt and the Hittites, were kept on silver plates, and the royal record of the deeds of Darius deserved nothing less than gold. And to have received considerable notice from Mormon writers. And there's a bunch of references on that. The mysterious Reformed Egyptian texts from Byblos are on bronze plates, and the Demotic Chronicle of Egypt was kept originally, not demonic, but demotic. The Demotic Chronicle of Egypt was kept originally on plates. There is an interesting account in Idris, 1226 AD, of the opening of the tomb of Mycerinus in the third of the three Great Pyramids. The writer reports that all that was found in the tomb was a blue sarcophagus containing the decayed remains of a man, but no treasure, excepting some golden tablets inscribed with characters of a language which nobody could understand. The tablets were used to pay the workmen. And the gold in each of them was worth about $200. That was a lot back then. A whole lot. We leave the reader to speculate on what might have been written on those plates of gold, which one of the greatest pharaohs apparently regarded as the greatest treasure with which he could be buried, which I'm sure they melted down. From an unexpected direction comes new and possibly significant light in the subject of record plates. Of recent years, a considerable number of copper plates inscribed, perforated, and linked together on metal rings have turned up in India. We may take as typical, except that they are narrower than most, the Kesabeda plates. The set consists of 3 copper plates strung together on copper rings. The circumference and diameter of the rings are about 7.4 inches. It's pretty dang big, though. And 2 inches, respectively. The plates measure roughly 7.5 inches in length and 1/5 an inch in the breadth of each. The corners are rounded off. The plate contains their proper right-hand hole, having a diameter of 1/5 inch for the ring to pass through. All the plates are written on both sides. The date of the plates is about 324 AD. The contents of a character of royalty, state, and conditions under which the land shall be governed. Farther east, but still within the sphere of Indian culture, inscribed plates of the same type, but which no one can read anymore, are handed down from father to son as ancient charms of supernatural origin, showing how the idea of authority and sacredness clings to the plates long after men have lost the ability to read them. Among the Karens, Karens, Such a plate, formed of two kinds of plates welded together back to back, one of copper and the other apparently of gold, was actually the talisman by which the chief held his power over the people, which means that the right to rule the land was attendant upon the possession of these plates, possibly because the plates actually were originally a royal charter. Probably. Now, hither India seems to be far removed indeed from the cultural world of Lehi. Yet the ancient and modern writing from the area was actually derived from Aramaic and Phoenician forms, taking ultimately from the Egyptian. Since the oldest writing known in India, not counting prehistoric glyphs of Mohenjo-Daro, etc., is that found on the plates, it is at least probable that the writing and the plates were introduced at the same time, and that the people who introduced the Semitic letters in the area kept their records on plates bound together with rings in the form preserved by the Indians themselves in their oldest and most sacred of records. The case of the Karens is particularly interesting because those people have displayed such astonishing cultural affinities with the Jews that some observers have even claimed them to be of Jewish origin. The people who say that would be on the Karens from 1854. Wow, books. If that is so, their history may have paralleled Lehi's in more ways than one. Many chapters of the diaspora remain to be written. But what we want to point out is that there is knowledge and use of metal plates for keeping of important records is beginning to emerge as a general practice throughout the ancient world. It will not be long before men forget that in Joseph Smith's day, the prophet was mocked and derided for his description of the plates more than anything else. Yes and no. Like, the problem is that there's been so much just content thrown at us. We forget history not because it's been erased, but because no one cares. They'd rather watch that new video on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Pinterest, whatever else. Why spend time reading about the plates that were found all over the world? So most people don't even think about plates as a history. So they still deride Joseph Smith having the golden plates. As one of the more recent YouTube commenters said, well, I could just make plates in my garage. Congratulations. Yeah, you could order them off Amazon. Whoopity frickin' do. That does not mean that's exactly what was around in the 1890s. Nor does it mean that it was around, 1830s? It wasn't around back then at all. When Joseph Smith was getting and translating the plates. And also, it wasn't commonly known as a way of keeping records. Now, there's plenty of other examples, but it's still not brought up. All those plenty of other examples. Why? Because either that point has been put to rest, and so people just don't bring it up because it's not a point. It's not one of those sticking points. As Cardinellis of Ward Radio always says, a lot of times these evangelicals or anti-Mormons that are just going after the church, they will just throw everything at the wall until something sticks. And so if it no longer sticks, it's just no longer brought up. And so my suspicion is that the idea of ridiculing us for saying historical writings were kept on plates just no longer sticks at all. So it hasn't been brought up in decades. Anyway, yeah. Nephi was much impressed by Laban's sword. The hilt thereof was of pure gold, and the workmanship thereof was exceedingly fine, and the blade thereof was the most precious steel. What's also really impressive is there was a YouTuber who's from, I think, Australia, who does a lot about swords and medieval stuff, but even he did one on the sword of Laban. And he is a member of the church, and they had him on Ward Radio. But he just did one video, because he's like, I can't let this be. He's not changing his whole channel to center around the church. His whole thing is swords and tactics of medieval stuff. but he definitely had that one on Laban's sword because he really wanted to figure it out. It was really cool. So, such ceremonial swords and daggers with hilts of finely worked gold have been common in the Near East throughout historic times. Many exemplars from Egypt and Babylonia repose in our museums, but none is more famous or more beautiful than the fine steel dagger with its hilt of pure gold and finest workmanship that was found on the person of the youthful king Tutankhamun. Everyone calls him King Tut, but I want to say it right. Tutankhamun. It has been suggested that this dagger was one of the two sent many years before by King Dushrata of the Mitanni to the then reigning pharaoh as the most royal gifts, as described in the contemporary documents, as having hilts of gold and blades of steel. Nephi's term precious steel is interesting, for in his day real steel was far more precious than gold, being made possibly of meteoric iron and of superlative quality. The famous Damascus blades of the finest steel the world had ever seen were always made of meteoric iron, according to Jacob, an indication of very ancient origins. Even in modern Palestine, swords and daggers have been mostly of Damascus or Egyptian manufacture. No Arab prince to this day has ever seen in native dress without his kahanjar, the long curved dagger of Damascus steel, with its glorious hilt of gold. These ceremonial weapons are often heirlooms of great antiquity and immense value. At any time from the Amarna period, 15th century BC, to the present, then Laban would be required by the etiquette of the aristocratic East to carry such a weapon, as Nephi describes. So he's just showing that the sword of Laban is something that would have been common at that time. Although it's not exactly a one-to-one, because he's giving examples of ceremonial daggers, not swords. And the reason I bring this up is, again, if you look at what Don Bradley has done in the last 116 pages, which I've read earlier, he shows that through looking through the past information about what was likely in those last 116 pages, that it very well could be, or could have also been Key to the Keystone. Might be getting those both mixed together. But Key to the Keystone and last 116 pages has a lot of insights, and it very well could be that the sword of Laban was the sword of Joseph, like Joseph of Egypt. Yeah, what you going as? Oh, that's a sucker. Oh, you got your stuff in your backpack.
Yeah.
You're ready for all the funs and parties that you have at school?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Have fun, my dear.
Happy Halloween. Well, this is probably going to be updated about...
No, I updated today. The problem is most people will see it later. So enjoy it in November.
Happy day, not Halloween.
Happy day, not in Halloween. Yeah, there you go. Except for the people who actually listen to it today. Anyways, much love to you. We'll see. I do like the idea that they say that it's always of meteoric iron. And we still see that today, that really cool swords have to be made from really cool stuff. Although there's a lot of YouTube videos about making Damascus steel this, Damascus steel that, by just combining all sorts of steel scraps to make a really cool pattern for whatever dagger or sword they're making. So I think most people think of it as meteoric iron because it would probably have the same type of result, because instead of having it be one large piece of iron that is forged into the blade, you fold or crush together and meld together the different pieces of iron, so that way it has ridges and stuff, especially if you etch it with a little bit of acid. Anyway, it makes it look like meteoric iron, which, if you ever go to your local museum, find the local planetarium or planetary museum, and go find the spot that talks about meteoroids and asteroids, and find the one that's cut open, and you'll see how it has these iron pellets all conglomerated together, and that they have kind of rings in them. It's kind of the idea of Damascus steel. So either by the look or by the actual, that's where it came from, you get the concept of it. All right. The end of the desert. In desert travel, the experts tell us one day is depressingly like another. For thousands of years, the language of the desert has remained virtually unchanged, employing the same words and expressions without alteration from century to century. Because, wow, that's how little it changes. Because the things they describe have never changed. With perfect right, Margoliouth uses the epic of Beni Hillel to illustrate the migrations of the children of Israel. Thousands of years before them, they do not migrate haphazardly, but send out scouts, and before making any move, they are careful to determine the will of heaven by various omens and auguries. That is just as true of Lehi's people, with their young men ceaselessly scouting and hunting. As to learn the will of heaven, what better device than the marvelous Liahona? The name suggests so many possible Hebrew and Egyptian interpretations. It is being interpreted as compass, Alma 37:38. That is one man's guess, is as good as another's, and it does not concern us here since, as a miraculous thing, it has no parallel in everyday life. Such a parallel may easily be found, on the other hand, to Nephi's comment on the marvelous way in which the women seemed to thrive on the hard Bedouin way of life. 1 Nephi 17:2. For this phenomenon has always impressed visitors among the Arabs, while, says Burton, between the extremities of fierceness and sensibility, the weaker sex, remedying its great want, power, raises itself by courage, physical as well as moral. You get women in a harsh environment, and the pale, paltry, oh, I can't do it, it's so hard, all those excuses have to go out the window. And when eventually the brass tacks finally hit their rear end and they get it in their head that ain't no one coming there to save them, these women become tough, and the tough women become good women. It's just like the whole cycle of soft men bring hard times make hard men, and hard men bring good times, and good times make soft men. You know, that whole cycle has all been recycled on the internet. I think it's true of women too. I think when too much of society has put too much pampering on all of us, frankly, we all fall into softness and immorality. And unless you have a taste, even just if you have awareness and a taste of hardship, you can become more competent. But when everything really hits, when the chips fall, whatever mixed metaphor you want to enter in here, if the brass tacks hit the fan, I mix my metaphors like I mix my drinks. But either way, the people who are weak-willed and weak morally, they don't make it. They either will be relegated to the margins of life and history. They will just be killed off, starved. I mean, when stuff really goes down, the weak don't make it. And so it changes you as a person. And hopefully you can change to being capable. Because if you don't, again, what do you become? Contemporary, if you watch the original Night of the Living Dead, you start out watching this girl going with her brother to the cemetery. And when a comet is announced as passing overhead, and while they're in the cemetery, this guy shambles up to them and is acting all weird, and he's just in a shabby suit, and starts pushing him away, and the brother knocks his head on a gravestone and dies, and she's just thinking that it's people who are homeless or whatever, or shabby or crazy coming up after her. She stays her night sometime in her car, but then she runs off to this farmhouse. But she's so traumatized, she ends up like being mute the rest of the movie. Like, this is the original one, 1960s. This guy named Ben, he's really cool. He's really the main character. But he helps defend the farmhouse for the whole movie. But anyway, what I'm trying to illustrate by this secular idea is that, yeah, if you freak out and don't become competent and don't try and go forward, if you freeze up, roll over, etc., you become something of a sideline. And that's what happened in that movie. And because we all know movies are absolute truth, but the idea is that you get the point. You know that there are people who just fall apart at the seams when the going gets tough, and then there are others who square up their shoulders and take the burden. So, there's my point. All right. There is no reason for Nephi to give us, in his greatly abbreviated history, a day-by-day account of a long and monotonous journey through the sands. He has given us clear general picture, as well as we've seen, of the ill temper and the exhaustion and the danger that make up the common tale of desert travel. And there is little more to tell than that. But he cannot conceal the excitement and delight of the journey's end. After traveling a vast distance in a southeasterly direction, the party struck off almost due eastward from Nahum through the worst desert of all, where they did wade through much affliction, to emerge in a state of almost complete exhaustion into a totally unexpected paradise by the sea. There is such a paradise in the Kara Mountains on the southern coast of Arabia. To reach it by moving nearly eastward from the Red Sea coast, one would have to turn east on the 19th parallel in the improvement era for September 1951. The present writer published a map in which this main concern was to make Lehi reach the sea in the forested sector of the Hadramot, and no other consideration dictated his sketching of the map. He foolishly overlooked the fact that Dr. John A. Woodstow had published in the era some months previous what purports to be, and probably is, a genuine revelation to Joseph the Seer, in which it is stated that Lehi's party traveled nearly a south-southeast direction until they came to the 19th degree of north latitude, then nearly east to the Sea of Arabia. By an interesting coincidence, the route shown by the author's map turned east exactly at the 19th parallel. This correlation of data from two totally different sources is a strong indication that both are correct. There you go. The only other possible route would have been down the western shore of the Red Sea from Necho's Canal, and on such a course one cannot turn eastward until passing the 10th parallel, and then it is not the Arabian Sea that one finds, but the Indian Ocean. Along with this, certain other rigorous conditions must be fulfilled, which can only be met on the south coast of Arabia. So, of the Kara Mountains, which lie in that limited sector of the coast south of South Arabia, which Lehi must have reached if he turned east at the 19th parallel, Bertram Thomas, one of the few Europeans who has ever seen them, writes, quote, "What a glorious place! Mountains, 3,000 feet high, basking above a tropical ocean, their seaward slopes velvety with waving jungle, their roofs fragrant with rolling yellow meadows, beyond which the mountains slope northward to a red sandstone steppe. Great was my delight when, in 1928, I suddenly came upon it all out of the arid wastes of the southern borderlands." Unquote. And you can still see this, basically, on Google Maps. I don't know if it's as lush as it was, but you can go to that spot, and you can see, just like, here you have the Arabian Desert, which is just like blanche white and red rock and just dead. And then you go right along the shoreline, and blink, there's this little place where there's a kind of small little valley with some running water that goes right into the sea, which would be the Indian Ocean. And it widens out into this valley where it has greenery and trees and lushness in it. And I assume it was probably a lot more lush further back. And there's kind of a highway that goes nearby. It kind of crosses over the canyon that goes out, that makes this land bountiful. Captain Thomas, whom Lowell Thomas calls the greatest living explorer, goes on to describe the aromatic shrubs of the place, the wooded valleys, the hazy rim of the distant sea lifted beyond the mountains rolling down it, and the wondrous beauty of the sylvan scenes that opened to the view as he passed down through the lush forest to the sea. Compare this with Nephi's picture, quote, "And we did come to the land which we called bountiful, because of its much fruit, and also wild honey. And we beheld the sea, and notwithstanding we had suffered many afflictions, and much difficulty, yea, even so much that we cannot write them all, we were exceedingly rejoiced when we came to the seashore, and we called the place bountiful because of its much fruit. And the voice of the Lord came unto me, saying, Arise, and get thee into the mountain." 1 Nephi 17, 5-7. It also has cliffs, by the way, which is an important part because that's when they were trying to build a ship. The brothers threatened to throw them off into the sea from a cliff. It is virtually the same scene: the mountains, the yellow rich woodlands, the timber for ships, the rolling yellow meadow, a paradise for bees, the view of the sea beyond, and, above all, joyful relief at the sudden emergence from the red sandstone steppe, one of the worst deserts on earth. Thomas, of course, was not interested in finding honey, but there are those who must live permanently in the desert. There is no greater treasure than to find honey. As a great number of roots and derivative words in the Arabic vocabulary make clear, much of the same description might suit the mountains of Omar, further east, and lying on the 25th parallel, the discovery of which came as a great surprise in 1838, when, in 1843, von Wrede gave a glowing description of the mountains of the Haramat, to which Lehi came. The great von Humboldt, and following him, of course, the whole learned world simply refused to believe him. Yep. Thomas's delectable mountains were unknown to the West until less than 25 years ago, which would have stuck it in the 1920s. Though the southern coasts of Arabia have admirable harbors, they appear not to have been used, with a few possible exceptions, until after the time of Christ. Watching Lehi's, and why? Why have a harbor there? Like, that's the thing, is this was a harbor for Lehi because he was leaving the area. But why use a harbor there? Because there's that southern point of the Arabian Peninsula with all its horrific desert and, as he says, the red steppes. Why have anything there? You would want to have a harbor closer, just closer to a city and trade routes. So that's why they were never used. Watching Lehi's travel-worn band wending its way down the pleasant valleys to the sea, one is moved to reflect that they have come an unconscionably long way just to build a ship. Well, let the reader suggest some other route. The best guide to Arabia at the time of the writing of the Book of Mormon imagined forests and lakes in the center of the peninsula. Whoops. So that's the kind of guides that they had at the time. Dude, it reminds me, so when I read 12 Weeks in a Balloon by Jules Verne, I didn't expect it to be anything. I'm like, really? That's a weird name for what's this about? It was about exploring the interior of Africa. Remember, by the time Jules Verne, the guy who wrote Around the World in 80 Days and Journey to the Center of the Earth and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, he was a science fiction writer. And he was writing science fiction about exploring the interior of Africa because it had not been mapped. He speculated that Lake Victoria, the big shallow lake that was known to be in Africa, was the source for the Egyptian Nile. They didn't know. And he was right. That was a speculation he got right. When he was writing 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, as contrast, he didn't know about the Antarctic continent. He has Captain Nemo going among these small Arctic islands and planting a flag claiming Antarctica to be his own. So when you sit there and hear the idea that the best guide of Arabia at the time of the writing of the Book of Mormon, that there was forests and lakes in the center of the peninsula, remember, Jules Verne didn't know that there was an entire continent of Antarctica. So It's pure speculation by what people think or imagine. Some people can give good guesses, like he got Lake Victoria to the Egyptian Nile right, and you can give really bad guesses, like having forests and rivers and lakes in the center of the Arabian Peninsula. Yeah, nah. Anyway, while insisting that the whole coastline was a rocky wall, a dismal and barren as can be, not a blade of grass or a green thing to be found. The Book of Mormon reverses the picture as Lehi avoided the heart of the continent to discover, continent. For us, anyway, that's just used in context to mean a landmass. To discover smiling woodlands on the south coast, where else could he have found his timber on all the coast of Arabia? It is quite probable, writes present-day authority, that Solomon has to transport his ships or the material for them from the Mediterranean, for where on the shores of the Red Sea could timber be found for shipbuilding? It could also be that the place had a lot more water back then, or before deforesting it for those ships. And what other route could Lehi have reached his happy shore? To the north lay enemy country, and the Mediterranean was a world of closed harbors and closed seas, and dangerous as the days of Wenaman, who was repeatedly stopped by enemies and pirates. The deserts of the east of Jerusalem swarmed with hostile and warring tribes. North and central Arabia were the classic grazing and fighting grounds of the Arabs, and so crisscrossed with trade routes in the time of Ptolemy that there appears little left of the inaccessible desert. In general, Ptolemy knows of no desert. Egypt offered no escape to one marked as... That seemed like a weird sentence. In general, Ptolemy knows of no desert. What? So crisscrossed with trade routes in the time of Ptolemy that there appears little left of the inaccessible desert. In general, Ptolemy knows of no desert. That's a weird kind of quote. I guess if everyone knows the trade routes, why worry about the desert? Egypt offered no escape to one marked as an enemy by the pro-Egyptian party. Only one way lay open, the hardest and wildest, through the mountains that border the Red Sea, and then due east over the western extension of the terrible empty quarter, where the party saw so much affliction. They had to turn east when they did, because the whole southwest corner of the peninsula comprised the kingdom of the Sabians, probably the strongest, richest, and most thickly settled state Arabia has ever had. So long and painful though it was, Lehi's itinerary turns out to have been actually the shortest and safest, if not the only one he could have taken. That's pretty good. On the shore of the Arabian Sea, the story of Lehi in the desert properly ends, though this has been but preliminary telling. Still, there is enough to justify certain reflections by way of summary. Just want to check something here. Yeah. Lehi on the witness stand. And then there's some simple tests. Let's do Lehi on the witness stand. We have never been very much interested in proving the Book of Mormon. For us, it is divine providence. Now, this is true. Look, the purpose of reading the extracurricular scriptural books it's not to prove something, because proof is going to be individual to each person of what helps them understand the truth of the Book of Mormon. Frankly, the best way is to have it divinely inspired. And the reason that's the best way is that way when doubts or questions come up, they know, wait a minute, there's so much that is true about this, and I already feel and know that it's right. So when I have these questions or this information comes up, they can easily say, I will look more into it, and they will want to. Or, I will keep it on the back burner until the answer presents itself. And they do. And they still continue to trust the source. Because it comes down to having that reliability and trust. That's what it comes down to. Because, like, if you sit here and And if you think of something as reliable and trustworthy, you use it. You trust it. I mean, think of all of science. We don't lightly toss away ideas. We don't just sit there and say, well, I found this one problem, this one thing, and so we got to throw the whole thing out. Yeah, that does not happen. Look at evolution. There are holes that do need to be filled in that. Do I sit here and say, well, throw everything out? We found one problem right here. Let's throw everything out. It's like, no. I will continue to understand the concept of it. I will be able to teach it with the way that they teach it. At the same time, I will go, but there are problems that need to be filled. Same with cosmology and physics. There is so much that we know that absolutely 100% totally works. But to sit there and have someone go, well, how does the magnet work? Well, it's because of this. How does that work? Well, it's because of this. Well, how does that work? Well, it's because of the spin of the subatomic particles. Well, what makes the spin of the subatomic particles? Some things are just innate. Well, that's where God is. It's like, you don't want to do that. You don't sit there and say, well, just because we can't explain how magnets work because they don't know how the spin of the subatomic particle that makes the regions magnetic. They don't know where that comes from, so they don't really know how magnetism works. It's like, no, we know exactly how it works, but what level do you want to have understanding? In the same way, it's because it's proved to be trustworthy, right? Where there is a hole, fine, there's a hole. Congratulations, explore more, right? And just the same thing with other knowledge, and especially spiritual knowledge. You can come to reliably know that the truth is there, fundamental truths about who you are, how you operate, how you emotionally work, how having the principles that Jesus Christ teaches betters your life, increases your capacity for happiness and for stability and safety with all those around you. All of these things show that reliability. And as soon as you have that, and most importantly, that divine inspiration and feeling of truth and reliableness from these things, then you can sit there and go, okay, yeah, well, I know all this is reliable. Okay, there's a hole. So what? Explore more. Let's learn more. Let's find more. That's why it's so important. Like, divine inspiration as the proof that's needed is just a way to have reliability and trust. And from there you go on. And then you don't fly apart at the single, like, yeah, there's this hole right there. All right. You can start figuring it out. You can start searching for answers. You can start actually going, defending it and figuring it out. Instead of just going, well, I didn't know that. Fine, let's throw out everything. That's how people go down strange paths. So, when Hugh Nibley says, we have never been very much interested in proving the Book of Mormon. For us, it is divine providence and always has been an article of faith. And it has historical aspects, by far the least important thing about it. But the world insists that it is a gross and stupid forgery, a barefaced fraud, perpetrated by an ignorant rustic who could hardly write his name. They have made the charge, let them prove it. That should be a very easy thing to do if they are right. A mere matter of rifling through a few pages and pointing out the swarming errors, since the accused has committed himself in no uncertain terms to an unsparing length. The nature of the document he pretends to be translating is so singular, and the conditions it must fulfill so unique and exacting, that its composer must certainly be convicted at a glance if he is lying. On the other hand, if his writing shows any tendency at all to conform to the particular conditions prescribed, its critics must be put to a good deal of explaining. And if it shows a constant tendency to conform to those difficult conditions, its critics will be bankrupt. We believe that this little study, tentative and limited as it is, nonetheless indicate such a tendency beyond reasonable doubt. And I agree. That is part of the point of this. Part of it is not to prove the Book of Mormon, because what proves something to someone will be sufficient for many people, but not sufficient for others. Why? Because those who are dead set against something, like the earth being round, will pass by with a blind eye, covering their eyes and plugging their ears to any evidence to the contrary. They will tie themselves up in knots in critical thinking, trying to explain things, if they are fighting against it. But if they aren't fighting against it, if they are just blindly wanting to stick down their path of, the world is flat, 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 they can do that. We didn't land on the moon, we didn't land on the moon, we didn't land on the moon. I'm sorry, we've got photographs from Japan and Russia showing that we landed on the moon. And the footprints! Anyway, they sent satellites around the moon and did high-resolution photographs. The Russian ones were pretty fuzzy. The Japanese ones were really good. They got, and you can see, here's the lander, and here's where they went, and depending on the landing station. So there's so much evidence for things if people are just willing to open their eyes and open their ears and be willing to listen. But the problem is, it's the same thing with the Book of Mormon here. There is so much evidence that shows that the Book of Mormon isn't just some la la la, and thus he said, and thus he this, and na. It's chloroform in print. Thank you, Mark Twain. You didn't read it critically at all. Well, let me rephrase that. You didn't read it for understanding at all. And because of that, you missed everything that shows consistency, importance, culture, and information that just explains all this stuff that we're talking about. So, exactly. But if you confront these critics with all this, la 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 la, they just pass by it, go on to the next. Well, you give them an answer. They will not address your answer. They will just move straight on to the next problem that they have. They will just gish gallop, meaning just put every little spot in front of you and say, well, what about this, what about this, what about this? It's like, here's the answer, here's the answer, here's the answer, here's the answer. Yeah, but you didn't answer this. Okay, now that you just brought it up, here's that answer. Well, you didn't answer this. What are you going to say about everything that I just told you? How are you going to twist yourself up in knots? Because I've shown you how it's consistent. Anyway, I'm shadowboxing again. But I think it's important to shadowbox against the arguments that the world puts forward, only because, in the end, hopefully someone who sees or reads this gets the idea that, maybe I have been more critical than I need to of these spiritual things. Maybe I should open my eyes to the idea that they have been giving answers, and I've been passing by too many of their answers to just go on to the next thing that I've been critical about. And yeah, that's a tendency of human beings, but if it opens the eyes of just one person to say, yeah, they've got a good point, it's worth it. So hopefully, if you have any of those tendencies, and listen to their arguments, it's okay. Just be willing to learn to plug those holes and say, oh, no, here's the answer right here. It's been there all along, but now I know it. So, be strong. So, what has been proved? Simply that everything which the book of 1 Nephi says happened really could have happened. Not that it did happen, because no one was actually there, is how I would put it. Not that it did happen. To prove that is neither necessary nor possible. Unique events in history can never be reconstructed with certainty, but characteristic related events, manners, customs, rituals, etc., things that happen not just once, but again and again in familiar patterns, may be the object of almost absolute certainty. So, unless you are literally there, doing it yourself, there's no way you can prove it. But isn't it funny that that's why we have a record? And that record also shows that all these things are the same pattern. Anyways, why else do we have witnesses? Why else do we have records? Because you can't prove anything unless you were there, right? With certainty. So you have to leave a record behind of what you had. Keep a journal! Anyway. So familiar patterns can be found with absolute certainty. Hence, they, and not the particular events, are the hardest things to fake. In testing forgeries and identifying documents is the general pattern that is all important. This principle is well illustrated in Chessman's criticism of Palgrave, though the latter's descriptions of Huff are so full of sheer inaccuracy and blazing indiscretion as to appear almost pure fabrications. And though Palgrave's map of Huff is so full of inaccuracies that I have not been able to orient it, Chessman nonetheless concludes that the picture Palgrave painted of Huff, its gardens, its archways, and its industries and people, could only have been composed by an eyewitness. With all its imperfections, the general picture presents objects that would not have been mentioned if had not been seen. It is only too easy, writes the same author, however careful one may be, to fall into little inaccuracies in an endeavor to put color into one's own descriptions of a country, and it is easier still, as I found, to come behind and point out the shortcomings of a predecessor. This is a powerful argument in favor of the sober and detailed account of Nephi whose mistakes of detail we could pardon if we could discover them. In talking about Lehi in the desert, we have, as it were, put the old patriarch on the stand as a witness in the case of Joseph Smith versus the world. Smith has been accused, and how, of fraudulent practices, and Lehi is a witness for the defense. He claims to have spent years in certain parts of the Near East, about 2,550 years ago. Is he telling the truth? Generations of shrewd and determined prospectors have failed to shake Lehi's testimony, or catch him contradicting himself. That should be enough to satisfy the most critical. But now, behold, out of the east comes new witnesses. Captain Hoshea of Lachish, a host of sunburned explorers returned from Lehi's deserts, to tell us what life is like. The ancient poets of the Arabs crates and crates of exhibits A to Z, seals, inscriptions, letters, artifacts from Lehi's own homeland. Whoever dreamed that Lehi would one day be confronted with eyewitnesses to the very scenes he claimed he saw? In the light of all this new evidence, the defense asks that the case be reopened. So, Lehi and the newfound witnesses are cross-examined together, and their answers compared. The questions come thick and fast. What is your name? Don't you know there is no such personal name? A shard is produced from Lehi's time. It bears the name Lehi, not an uncommon one. Where did you live at the time? What do you mean, the land of Jerusalem? Don't you mean the city? Defense produces an ancient letter showing that the territory around the city was all known as the land of Jerusalem. Who governed Jerusalem? What kind of men were they? What did you do to turn them against you? Where did you get this great wealth your son talks about? How did you happen to learn Egyptian? Wasn't that a waste of time? Why didn't you learn Babylonian, a language much nearer to your own? What was all the trouble about in your family? I have quite a list of names here, your purported family and descendants. Do you expect the court to believe these are genuine? If this is a genuine list, why does it contain no Baal names? You say you had dreams about what? A river? What kind of river? What is this weird mist of darkness? Did you ever see anything like it when you were awake? Dozens of witnesses testify. Don't you think a dream is pretty slim pretext for leaving your home and country? In which direction did you flee? How could you build up a big caravan without being apprehended? What did you take with you? How did you travel on foot? How did you manage to survive with women and children in a terrible desert? How did you escape being killed off by raiders? Don't you know that the desert was very dangerous? What did you eat? Did you march continually? When you camped? What was the first thing that you did? What kind of altar? What sort of game did you hunt? Where? How? Who did the hunting? Your son made a bow, you say. Where in desolate Arabia could he find wood for that? What right had you to go around giving new names to places? Do you think any sane person would give a river and its valley different names? Roar of protest from Arabs in the audience. Whoever called the Red Sea a fountain? Don't you know there are no rivers in Arabia? This little speech you gave your sons on the riverbank, isn't it a bit overdone? More protest from the Bedouins. Don't you think it's rather silly to describe a valley as firm and steadfast? Where did your sons stay when they went back to Jerusalem? What about this cave? Aren't metal plates rather clumsy writing material to keep on records? Aren't 50 men a ridiculously small garrison for a city like Jerusalem? You describe nocturnal meetings between the elders and the commandant. Wouldn't it be much more sensible to hold meetings in the daytime? Don't you want the court to believe that you actually carried grain with you on this long and exhausting journey? Are you trying to tell the court that you found a paradise on the southernmost rim of the most desolate land on earth? And so on, and so on. The reader may add to the list of searching questions at will. There are well over 100 possibilities indicated in our study, and most of such questions as no one on earth could have answered correctly 120 years ago. The writer of 1 Nephi was confronted by 100 delicately interrelated problems of extreme difficulty. The probability of coming up with a plausible statement by mere guesswork once or twice is dim enough. But the chances of repeating the performance 100 times in rapid succession are infinitely remote. The world through which Lehi wandered was to the Westerner of 1830 a quaking bog without a visible inch of footing, lost in impenetrable fog. The best Bible students were hopelessly misinformed, even about Palestine. Scientific study of the Holy Land began with Edward Robinson in 1838. Yet 40 years later, a leading authority writes, "Few countries are more traveled in the Palestine, and in few are the manners and customs of the people less known." The official statement of the Palestine Exploration Fund 10 years later was, "There is scarcely anything definite known about the desert of the wandering." The Bible itself, instead of clearing up problems in the main cause for the great discrepancy, the Bible itself, instead of clearing up problems, is the main cause for the great discrepancies in the reports of the observers, according to Palmer. The classic example of this is Dr. H. Clay Turnbull's Kadesh Barnea, recommended by high authorities in 1884 as the standard work on the South Desert and accepted by biblical geographers as the authority on the district, right down to our own day when Woolley and Lawrence explored the area and discovered that this infallible guidebook was simply fantastic. As to Clark's work on the same region, published a year after Trumbull's, the same critics content themselves with remarking, "We will not print comments on this." As late as 1935, Colonel Newcomb could write, "I had several books on the subject of wanderings, but nearly all were written by idealistic but very inexperienced visitors. Most of these books had entirely missed the truth from a lack of knowledge of the country or understanding of the Bedouin mind. Each seemed to exaggerate grossly his own little theory at the expense of anyone else's. So let no one suppose that access to the Bible would have made easy the task of comparing the story of Lehi. It would only have complicated matters. Yet we find our guide confident and sure-footed, never retracing his steps to change his course, never hesitating a moment or seeking refuge in non-committal vaporings, never begging to be excused or falling back on the old appeal to be understood in a religious sense only, never moving behind a smokescreen or becoming consciously or unconsciously confusing or involved. I'm going to leave that here for today. Next is simple tests, and that will end off. Oh, it's only a few pages. I'm always so tempted. This is what I love about these books, is that I get in there and I'm like, I can keep going, I can do it, come on, let me in, coach, let me in. But yeah, I'm going to put the time out on that. we're going to go and we're going to huddle again and we're going to go for a new play and to get the ball into the goalpost and the hoop and score a goal. Anyway, I mix my metaphors like I mix my drinks. So, I don't need a compass to tell me which way the wind shines. In the end, that's the very good point. Like, as I was describing earlier, all of this is to help enrich our understanding of the Book of Mormon. Ultimately, whatever proof you feel is necessary for yourself to find the text reliable is up to you. You can be presented with a mountain of evidence, just as we have from Lehi in the desert here, or the Lost 116 Pages, or Key to the Keystone. All of these things all point to truth, reason, and evidence. Whether that's literary, whether that's geographically, whether that's theme-wise, whether that's patterns-wise, I mean, whatever you want. We can keep showing this mountain of evidence, but it will never be enough if someone does not want to find it reliable, if they specifically choose to not have it reliable. On the other hand, if you have the smallest bit of understanding that allows you to open that door and say, wait a minute, this is actually probably reliable, then you have a floodgate of information that helps sustain that. That's the point of all this, is it's to sustain what you already know deep down, the truthfulness of it. How that come about will always be different for other people. And my biggest question that I always have is, what can be done to take someone from a cynic perspective, a cynical, oh, this is unreliable, this is chloroform imprint, this is just awful, to having them go, yeah, I was wrong on that. This really is a good and truthful book in a lot of ways. And being able to accept that even it, I'm wondering if that is the main question, and my musings upon it are along these lines. I wonder if the hurdles to people accepting it are, let's say they do have a critical view, that they have problems with the text or the teaching or this historical fact or that historical fact, that even when those are answered, they're still like, oh, yeah, but I don't know. I suspect that trepidation comes from the idea that, well, I had a problem with this for so long, there's probably other problems that I don't know about, and I don't know if I want to accept it unless it's completely true. But I think therein lies the undiscussed and unarticulated problem that lies within the heart of most people who have that type of attitude. They don't even know that that's what makes them hesitate. And because they can't articulate it, they can't examine it, and they can't overcome it. But when you articulate the idea that, well, I don't want to accept something unless I know it's absolutely true, then you also have to look at, if you apply that standard to other knowledge that you have, are you truly being fair? How many of us know 100% about anything? Like, truly anything. Have you even been there? Like, let's take an example from Milton Friedman. No man knows how to make a pencil. The most simple thing. You have graphite inside wood that is glued together. So there's graphite, wood, glue, paint, gold foiling if you have the number 2 pencils that had the gold foiling, or engraving with black paint. Or you could just keep it simple and just have some sort of paint or covering over it, but the glue to keep the wood stuff together. A metal perforated tin type or aluminum type foil that combines the wooden pencil to end to the eraser. It's every little piece of that manufacturing goes into a huge whole breadth of knowledge and information and technicality of, well, how do you get the ore to make the metal, and then refine it, and then get it in the sheets, and then get it into the machines, and how are the machines themselves made, and the technicality for that, and it just goes on and on. It just becomes this infinite fractal of knowledge that comes together to make a pencil. And the same can be said for, like, pizza. Like, if you were going to make a pizza, let's even keep it simple. You could probably legitimately, for those who have the knowledge, go out and make cheese pizza if you have your own cow or goat, depending on the type of cheese you like. But let's assume cow, and let's assume you have your home garden so you can make tomato paste, and then maybe an herb garden for any herbs that go in that tomato paste and on your pizza, and that you also grow your own wheat and you know how to grind your own wheat. You could make a cheese pizza, right? But the more complicated you get the pizza, the more harder it becomes. And there's a lot more knowledge you have to get and a lot more work that goes into it. And so in the same way, when I sit here and say, what do we really truly know? Do you have the skills for that? What we ultimately do is we rely on people that we believe to be honest. Just like those books that they said about, this is how Arabia is. And then the explorers go there and they go, no, it wasn't. These guys have never been here. I've been here, and it is not like what they said in those books that we used as guides. So things can change. And like I was pointing out with science too, if you accept all these principles of science, there's holes in it. And when you understand those holes, are you just going to throw the baby out with the bathwater? Are you going to judge the book by its cover? Are you going to judge the baby by its cover and throw the book out with the bathwater? It's just like, come on, guys. Every type of knowledge that you have has holes in it that you don't actually know to fully be true. Whether it's trivia of one sort or another, or whether it's understanding of politics, religion, science, mathematics, how the world works, how people's emotions works. There's always more you can learn. So, if you apply the standard properly, you should be at ease with being able to accept the Book of Mormon. Because as long as you can, for yourself, learn that it's reliable, which is probably best done through personal revelation, a spiritual experience, because that way you have a more deep emotional understanding of it and an emotional acceptance of it, so that it's something that you would less want to throw away at the drop of a hat. Then you can fill it in with all this information and go, heck yeah, is it true? Boy, howdy, is it true? And still any other holes that you find, you're like, okay, I'll probably find out about that later. And still go, but yeah, this is great. You can rejoice in the fact that you have truth. And boy, howdy does it make such things great. Because the idea that Jesus Christ is not just someone who appeared 2,000 years ago, but the actual idea that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and he was sent to us to be the mediator for us, the one who did the atoning sacrifice, that we all get to live again. All of this starts falling into place. It's not just like, wait a minute, why do we have that? Well, we have a second witness. It's not just the New Testament. If you read Jonah Barnes' books and the Apocrypha, you got even a lot more in the Old Testament that should have been there. That should have been the Old and the New, not just the New Testament. But then you also have the Book of Mormon that shows that it was in the Old Testament, and you have the Book of Mormon that also shows that it was after he came, that he went to the whole world. There are stories of Jesus Christ going up to Japan. There are stories of a white God coming down and teaching the people in many places. That Jesus Christ went through to see other sheep that was way beyond just those that were only in the Middle East. And it's a witness of his divinity. And this is a good thing. I don't understand when people are like, no. Bible or bust. It's like, why? If he is the God over the whole world, why wouldn't he show himself to everyone else he could? Anyone who is willing to listen and learn, why wouldn't he go to them? And why wouldn't we have records and stories and myths and legends that point to that? Fact is, we do. Sorry, I'm very enthusiastic about that, because when you finally understand the rules of having witnesses and the confluence of information from across the world to show the divinity of Jesus Christ, it becomes really apparent. And sure, we have all this other division, but the more that you narrow your scope and narrow your mind and everything like that, it's like if you focus literally only on physics, but you also don't understand biology or you don't understand chemistry, you suddenly grind to a halt in your area of study. The best areas of study come from when you have a broad set of knowledge. You specialize in things, absolutely, but you also broaden your knowledge and see how it applies in other things. And then you're just like, oh, wait, this physics stuff applies here in chemistry, and this chemistry stuff applies here in this biology stuff, and that chemistry, biology stuff can apply to computers and computer learning. Look at all the advancements we've made. It's because after we did this huge specialization and narrow specialization to advanced individual things, we started making it broader in learning and then influenced everything through spreading that way. Same thing should be with the gospel. Learn, absolutely 100% learn and have your foundation be the 100% scriptures. And then spread out your knowledge. Start looking into this extra stuff. All right, you've had my tirade. I want you, yes you, we need you to go out and be a spiritual person. Apply the teachings of Jesus Christ. You have had holes in your knowledge and information filled for the day, but now go and be a doer of the word, not a hearer only. May God be with you.